Good morning, students. Welcome to the subject of Productions and Operations Management. We are dealing with unit number 5, that is all about Aggregate Planning and Maintenance Management. This is the fifth part of the unit. This unit, as I have told you, has been divided, or I have divided it in 3 portions to make the things easier for you. Number 1 is aggregate planning, and related topics are introduction, definition, importance, approaches, methods, and aggregate planning in services, which we have done in the previous 4 sessions. Right? Here is the capacity planning, which is the second part of the unit that has been divided into capacity planning and capacity requirement planning. That we shall see it as the next portion, and the third one is all about maintenance management. So as I told you in the previous lecture, we have studied aggregate planning quite in detail, and in today's session we'll take up with the capacity planning. Now, as far as the capacity planning is concerned, we are going to study 5 different aspects, interrelated aspects of capacity planning. But before we start anything, we must understand what is capacity planning. Right? What is capacity and planning? Capacity means it is a kind of the maximum output that can be produced in a particular setup can be known as capacity. Right? Here we will understand the concept of capacity. Right? And the next portion would be say about the types of capacity planning, importance, it may be activities involved and factors involved. Now, factors affecting the capacity planning rather. Now, if we want to understand the concept of capacity planning, we'll be dividing it into 2 parts. That means what is capacity planning and how to do the capacity planning, means how that can be performed. Let us see what is capacity planning. After the selection of the production process, the manufacturer often faces the problem of deciding the capacity. See, if I am a manufacturer, I decide the process that okay, with this process I am going to produce product Z. Right? But then the immediate question that comes up in my mind is that with what capacity am I going to produce? Now, what is this capacity all about? Then we can say that it is the maximum production rate of a plant or a facility in a given period of time. That means whatever a machine or whatever the set of machines or system can produce, maximum rate of output that can be produced in a plant using the facilities can be known as the capacity. That means capacity indicates volume of production in the form of output in a given period of time. I repeat, what is capacity? Capacity is the maximum production rate of a plant or a facility. What it includes? It includes or it indicates the volume or the output of production in a given period of time. That is what is known as capacity. It is very important decision for the manufacturer because it helps to decide that what should be the capital investment that is involved in the fixed assets. See, once I decide that I am going to produce X number of or X item, then the immediate question comes up, and there is that with process that I have decided is suppose ABC, but then I have to also decide at the same time that what will be the number of machines that I'll require, what amount of output I want to give it to the market. Accordingly, I'll have to decide my capacity, or according to it my whole capital requirement will be allocated. It also helps to decide whether the facility is sufficient. Naturally, with the help of the capacity planning or with the help of capacity, we decide capacity, suppose 100 units per day. That means it will help me to learn that whether whatever the machines, and suppose if I have 10 machines at a time, now if I want to have 100 units being produced at the end of the day within 8 hours of work, then I have to see that all these 10 machines, and per machine has the capacity of producing 10 units per day when it works for 8 long hours, right? When a machine works for 8 long hours and it produces z items, then at the end of 8 hours it will be able to have the capacity production of 10 units. That means if I want to meet my demand of 100 units per day, suppose, that means that these 10 units or 10 machines I have to keep on working for 8 hours and they will be producing. That means the capacity of these 10 machines or the capacity of the plant is to produce 100 machine at the end of the day. This is how the capacity helps us, or if we take up with the planning of this capacity, then ultimately we come to know that whether the facility is sufficient enough to meet the customer demand or not, or even it helps to decide whether the facilities would remain idle. That is also not an ideal situation. Why? Because it will create the wastage of resources. Supposingly, if my machine or 10 machines in my plant can produce 100 units, but at the same time I am just producing 50 units, that means out of 10 machines only 5 machines are into use, then these 5 machines, the other 5 machines becomes the idle capacity. Then that's a wastage of resources, because I have already invested fixed amount of some kind of, say, fixed investment on some kind of these 5 machines which are not at all working and giving me any kind of output. That is why this is very crucial decision on the part of manufacturer as to plan out the capacity as a whole. Thus it becomes extremely important, as I said, to determine the exact capacity of the firm. This is important also for earning high rate of returns on the investment and to decide the profit. Because once we can decide the capacity, then we can have the production accordingly and we can make the sale of the product can meet the demand, and accordingly we can earn the profit. Thus capacity planning is necessary when one organization either decides to increase its production or it wants to introduce a new product. That means at 2 stages it has to decide what will be the capacity that it will be using, or how the capacity of the plant or the unit is to be planned out, right? So either it will need at the time of increasing production. That means right now if we are producing 100 units, then we have already made a kind of capacity planning for it. But if I want to increase it to 50 more units, then again the capacity planning has to be done by me as a manufacturer, right? On the other end, if I want to introduce the similar type of product with whatever the facility is right now, then at that time also I need to do the capacity planning. Thus once capacity is evaluated and a need for new facility is determined, further there are so many decisions related to it which has to be taken, like facility regarding the facilities to be used, maybe the plant location, maybe the process selection, and likewise. That is why capacity planning can be considered as the very crucial decision on the part of manufacturer. See, what we have done is, as the fall of the syllabus is, like I have changed it so that it becomes easy for you to learn. In the first case we have learned all about what is production and operations management. In the second, once the person decides whether to produce the say tangible goods or services, his next priority would be thinking about the location and then the layout, then the process he selects, and then ultimately he decides what my capacity of production is and how much I'll be able to produce, right? Now when he is taking up with the capacity planning, then it may be done on the basis of time. One will be the long term capacity planning for more than 1 year. The next type can be how he wants to plan out. Then on the basis of time zones, he can take up with the intermediate medium term planning, that is 3 to 18 months, which we have already seen in the part of aggregate planning. And the third one comes up is short run capacity planning. Here ultimately very short period is considered. That means on the basis of these 3 time zones capacity planning can be done. Now what this long term planning is all about? See, in the long term planning, the name itself tells us that the period is more than 1 year or maybe even beyond that. Here what is the advantage? That we'll be able to add the equipments if we want to. Suppose if I want to take up with the 5-year capacity planning of my unit, then in that case I may be able, right now if I'm having 10 machines, in the next 5 years to come I may even increase it to 50 machines, depending upon the capacity or depending upon the demand of my production, depending upon the demand of my product by the customers. If I wish to increase the capacity of my plant, then I'll be able to do it, and that type of planning is said to be long term capacity planning. On the other hand, intermediate or medium term planning is such a kind of planning that it adds to maybe the equipments, it helps to have more number of personnel or reduce it, we may have to increase or decrease the shifts, and also the subcontracting can be done. Even there can be changes in the use of inventory, more or less depending upon the production, and that too is dependent upon the forecast of the demand, right? And this is when we do, it is said to be aggregate planning. This we have already seen in the previous sessions, wherein we used to plan everything between 3 to 18 months or maybe 6 to 18 months, right? And whenever we plan in this intermediate period, then what we can do is we can just change the current assets, we can make the uses of more inventory or less inventory, or we can make the uses in the shifts of the workers, and likewise we can make the minor changes. And what is important is that with the existing capacity we try to manipulate the resources and we try to produce the the production, or maybe produce the items depending upon the demand arising for it. And that is why it is also known as aggregate planning, and it is intermediate medium planning also. Now the third type of planning that comes up is short run planning. See how we can do, then any manufacturer can use any of these method. Either as a manufacturer I can go for long term planning, for the as a manufacturer I can go for the planning of 6 to 18 months, which is normally known as a part of aggregate planning. The third one comes up is short run capacity planning, wherein in a very short period what happens here is that I can what happens here is that I can just say change the number of jobs or maybe people or machine allocation is possible. Here beyond that I cannot do anything. That means I may not be able to make the major modifications in the planning, or I may not be able to take up with major installations of the machines. That may not be possible. That is absolutely impossible, and that is why the short period is between say 15 days, 3 months, 6 months, right? During that major modifications cannot be taken up and the existing capacity is to be used out properly. This type of planning is known as on the basis of the time period, right? So what we have done up till now is what is capacity planning we have taken up, right? And we have tried to see that how it is done. Then here time based capacity planning we have seen. We are moving towards the next area, that is said to be the types of capacity planning. When we are taking up with the types of capacity planning, there may be many types that we'll be studying one by one. Most of them are having the titles which are self-explanatory, even though these titles have been explained in detail, and I'll be explaining it to you in detail also. Alright, so let us begin from the fixed capacity. Now what is this all about? It is the total capacity of the firm or total capital asset at a particular time. It's the upper limit that a company can use to meet its demand, and it can't be changed in the intermediate time period. That means the fixed capacity is such a kind of capacity planning in which the firm decides or takes up the total assets, and for a particular period of time whatever the maximum output it can give, that can be considered as the fixed capacity, right? It is the upper limit that a company can use to meet its demand in a given period of time. Beyond that, you cannot make the capacity, or you cannot make the use of these assets. That is what is known as fixed capacity. We move on to the next one, that is known as adjustable capacity. What is adjustable capacity? It represents the size of workforce, number of hours per day or maybe week they work, number of shifts, or at times even the number of subcontracting. Whatever comes up and whatever adjustments are to be done related to all these areas, say it may be workforce, it may be number of hours, it may be number of for a day or week or whatever the requirement may be, maybe the shifts are to be changed, then all these comes up as the adjustable capacity, because we make the adjustments accordingly, right? Third type is design capacity or installed capacity. See, it is what? It is the planned rate of output under the normal or full scale operating conditions. Designed means at the time of installation, whatever we have kept in mind, that if the whole unit works with this designed capacity or installed capacity, then we'll be having this much of the full scale kind of say outputs in the normal operating condition, and it also helps us to give the maximum level of output and helps us for the actual capacity. Actually, on the basis of design capacity, then we can have the adjustment done, and that is why it is considered to be the installed capacity or maybe design capacity, wherein whatever we are putting up and whatever with this capacity or whatever with these machines we have, we can make the best out of it. That is known as the designed capacity. Next comes up is system capacity. Now it is less than or equal to the designed capacity. See the try to understand the importance. It is less than or equal to designed capacity. That means it cannot go beyond designed capacity. It can be less or it can be equal, or it denotes the maximum output that system includes, maybe machines, workers, or whatever the current assets are. We can make the changes and we can make the machines at work, we can make the workers at work, and either will be able to give as per the design capacity, or it may be the little less than that. That is said to be system capacity. With whatever the inputs we have, whatever we can give it as the maximum, that becomes the system capacity, right? Fifth is said to be potential capacity. Potential is word that is always used for future, right? So the capacity that can be obtained in the unit for future through the top management planning with the existing infrastructure is known as potential capacity. Right now, supposingly, if the 10 machines are there, but they are made to use for work for 6 hours only. Now that is installed capacity, that is design capacity. Now potential capacity can be even for the next 6 hours it can be made to use. That means 6 plus 6, it can be made to use for next 12 hours, or maybe further 6 hours it can made to use. Then that is said to be the potential capacity, wherein we are trying to obtain something out of the unit or maybe out of the capacity for the future, and this decision may be taken up by the top level management, not making the changes in the existing infrastructure. What happens in the sixth one is immediate capacity. It is the capacity to produce just after the completion of one period and then for the next period. That means if for the 6 months, whatever the amount of number of units which may be produced, the same may be produced for the, or maybe the altered ones may be produced for the immediate cycle to follow. That is what is known as immediate capacity. The seventh one comes up is effective capacity. Now it is actually the practical capacity which ranges from 75 to 80%. None of the unit makes the maximum or theoretical or maybe the designed or installed capacity is not used maximum times by the unit. It can be due to any of the reasons. It may be due to breakdown, it may not be able to, due to preventive maintenance, or due to any kind of abnormal delays. It may not always be able to use the 100%. So what happens is, if it is not using 100%, then how much is it using? Then it may be just 75 to 85%. Then this used capacity can be known as effective capacity. We move on for the eighth one, that comes up as normal or average capacity. That means it is the capacity or estimated quantity of the output or production that should be achieved as per the estimation by engineering department in normal conditions. That means in the normal condition, if everything is made to use, then whatever the average output would be, that becomes the average capacity or known as normal capacity. Ninth one comes up is actual or used capacity. See, effective capacity gives general idea of the output, while actual capacity is the actual output per machine, right? It is not generalized, but it is more precise and pinpoint that at one machine will be able to produce only 8 items normally. Instead, the maximum installed may be 10 items, but in normal cases, in generalized not, but in a say a precise pinpoint cases, a machine would be able to produce suppose 8 units, then that becomes the actual production of the, or maybe the actual capacity of the plant. It is expressed as percentage of the rated capacity, and it can be less than rated output due to many of the reasons. It cannot be exactly according to what we have planned out. It may be because of the absenteeism, maybe poor productivity, or any kind of delays or any kind of inefficiencies, that we may not be able to produce the say standard capacity. Instead, whatever comes up is the actual capacity. Suppose if 100 unit is decided, and actually every day we'll be able to produce say 95 units only, then it may be because of any poor productivity. It may be because the number of people who are working on it remains absent, or maybe it may be due to any of the scrap or any kind of such material say which are not of a quality. Then at that time the actual capacity may be less than whatever we have expected to be. That means like this we'll come to know, or we have seen almost 8 types of capacity planning, right? That if we want to do the what is capacity planning, means we can decide whatever the maximum output would be, right? That can be done on the basis of 3 time period. It may be long run, it may be medium or intermediate, which is often known as aggregate planning, and the last one is short run, right? And we have also seen the different types of different types of capacity planning. We are moving towards the next part, that why it is so important to go for capacity planning. Now, for a manufacturer, it is of immense importance. Why? Because if capacity is planned and used, it gives the long-term benefit. Like you can have the high goodwill, you will have the low wastages, you will be economically producing the items, the production can be made flexible, serving the customers is possible, better usage of resources can be done, production as per the demand can be taken up. So it is very, very important that one must take up with capacity planning. Moreover, there can be the firm becomes more competitive with the help of capacity planning. You exactly know that this is my fixed capacity, or this is my fixed installations, and out of this if I make them use for the maximum, or if I make them to the use, then whatever is done is that I'll be able to produce these many items, which makes it me more competitive than my firm. That is why even the loopholes at times can be known. So it makes the firm more competitive in nature. Next, the third important point is that it helps to select the technology, types of labor, and suitable equipments. I just told you that even the loopholes can be seen. So at times we can identify that these technology can be used instead of what we are using. The types of labor can be say changed accordingly. Even the suitable equipments can brought into use, and likewise. The fourth importance is that it helps to decide viability and success of the business enterprise. That means if we want to make whether the business will run for a long time or not, successfully whether it will be able to run or not, that can be known at the very primary stage. That is, while doing the capacity planning, we can even come to know about the viability of the business. The fifth and the last one is capacity helps to build strong relation because if we plan out with the capacity, we can even check out with the location, the layout, maybe the process design, even the selection of equipments can be done, and likewise so many interrelated decisions can be taken up properly if we take up with the capacity planning being the manufacturer. These are the 5 important points which tells us why capacity planning is so much of significant to a manufacturer. Then the 4th point comes up is activities involved in capacity planning. What do we do exactly in capacity planning? Then first of all, we examine the existing capacity. Whatever we have, we try to assess, we try to examine. Next, we make the forecast of the future capacity, right? That means forecasting the future capacity needs. If suppose the demand is going to increase, then whether with the existing capacity will be able to meet the needs or not. Next, fourth one, what can we do is we can find out the various ways of modifying capacity, that whether we can make to use more number of machines which are idle right now, or we can make the use of manpower, or we can use the better technologies. All these various ways of modifying capacity can be taken up or is done generally. Then we can evaluate the financial, economical, or even the technological types of changes that are required in the capacity planning, right? The next one comes up is we can select the capacity alternative which is best for the business. That means with the help of capacity planning, if we have decided a wrong kind of capacity, or if we are putting up a finger on wrong thing, or maybe not a proper alternative is decided, but with the capacity planning we can even decide the best alternative for us. It involves the decision that matches the consumer demands with the organizational resources. Naturally, no manufacturer is producing for himself. So with the capacity planning, what he does is he tries to match whatever the consumer demands is, and whatever the resources the company has, whether it will be able to match or not. So generally these type of activities are undertaken while we do the capacity planning, right? Next comes up are the different factors. Now this is the last point as far as capacity planning is concerned, that there are various factors that affects the capacity decision, right? To understand it in a better way, it has been divided into 2 parts. One is the controllable factor and the other one is less controllable factor. Mind you, they are not completely uncontrollable, but they are less controllable factors. Now what is this controllable factors? They are under the control of the manufacturer and thus can be considered easily, right? We know it and we can make the factors count when we take up with the capacity planning. And the other are less controllable, means they completely depend on the conditions and situations, though it affects the capacity planning. Let us first understand the controllable factors. Out of it, number 1, number of labor employed. That means whatever number of people are there, accordingly we can plan out the capacity for the company. Suppose if the 5 people are there, that means you can take the work of these 5 people only. Out of these 5 people, you can't expect them to work for 10 persons, as good as 10 persons. That means this is a controllable, and if you feel that yes, demand for the product is there and we may need 5 more people, then that can be done. So 5 plus 5 makes it 10. So whatever number of labor employed you require, that can be known, or we can take that into consideration for the capacity planning. What is the next determinant that comes up is machines and tools. What type of machine and tools we are using, how many shifts per day we want to make the people work for, what is the facilities that are installed, what will be the working days per week, how much overtime work can be given, what will be the say policy for preventive maintenance, what can be the alternative routine or work. If we are doing some kind of work, then what will be the alternative routine, right? The next comes up is number of setups of the production activity. That means how the whole production activity is to be taken up. Now these are all such determinants that that should be considered by the manufacturer. Randomly he cannot decide on capacity planning. He has to see all of them, he has to consider it, he has to evaluate it properly. And that is why in the previous point we have seen examining the existing capacity. That means he examines everything, he assesses everything, he takes into consideration all the types of controllable factors, because it is completely in the hands of the manufacturer to handle these factors. But he cannot put up, or he cannot be negligent about any of this, so that he can make the wiser decision, right? As far as the next part is concerned, that is about the less controllable factors. Now what are these? These are known as the factors in these are not known factors in advance. That means in advance we cannot take this, we cannot consider it. Instead, whatever the condition is of the person or maybe the unit, accordingly the decisions are altered, and they are known as labor absenteeism. You can never make out about the labor absenteeism, though it becomes very important factor to be considered. Next, employee performance. You may expect them to work good, but they may not give you the good output. Then it has to be, anyways it has to be considered. There may be any kind of material shortage, again that's not in the hand of the manufacturer. There may be any kind of sudden machine breakdowns, there can be scrap or rework. That means the more of the wastages are occurring, or you may have to work out again and again on same product. That may also be the case. There may be any kind of contingency or any kind of accidents that may be there, strikes or kind of lockouts. All these are such kind of factors which may arise, and if they arise, then you have to be doing your capacity planning accordingly. This is how this set of factors, or we can call it determinants, affects the capacity planning decision. That means if a manufacturer takes up with the capacity planning, he has to keep all these controllable and less controllable factors before him, how they influence his production, how they influence his process, how it influences financial risk, how it affects the unit. That has to be considered, and then the capacity planning for a particular period of time can be done. It may be for long run, it may be for intermediate time period, or it may be even for the short time period. This totally depends upon the discretion of the manufacturer, and this is what is known as factors affecting the capacity planning. Right, here we come to an end of capacity planning as a next or second part of the unit aggregate planning and maintenance management. Right, when we meet next, it will be the session on say CRP, capital requirement planning, and it will be on maintenance management. By the time we meet next, it is a goodbye from my side. Take care of yourselves. You have got the text to refer. Please keep the text before you. In case if you have got the old edition of the text, then in that case you can refer the handout given to you, or maybe the video lectures that are before you. You can use them as your notes also. Right, so as I have been telling you from the beginning, that please maintain the notes for the same, so that those students who are not having the text with you can easily manage with whatever the content are, as far as this points or maybe the PowerPoints are concerned. So by the time we meet next, until the time we meet next, it's a goodbye from my side. Take care. Thank you.